Hello, and welcome to another video from K-BAS. Hope all everyone's been doing well. I just got off for work. I am tired, but I'm going to try to be bringing people more content. Today, this is a K-MASH episode. In other words, my musing about stuff, homie. This is this is my videos where I just talk about random stuff I think that came to my mind. And what led me to want to do a K match today is because one of the people who I do follow named Hitbox John Zonadu, pretty good player, has a lot of things they like to express on Twitter, and he brought up some topic about fighting defensive. Sorry, he decided to post a thread on Twitter about the state of fighting game when it comes to defensive mechanics and whatnot. And me, as a person who prides himself on playing defensively, and as the self-proclaimed Sekokin disciple, I feel like I have a few words in this. I think I could take a shot at this thread. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So first off, maybe do we need a beginning? Uh, well, you already read it if you're on this page. So let's go ahead and get to the first part. So question number one. Uh, So Xanadu pauses. While playing the fighting game, do you only ever push a button or perform an action where you know for 100% fact that it will work? You will not do something if your success is not guaranteed. Yes or no? So personally, uh, there's unless you're playing a very turn heavy game or there's a situation you labbed for like I don't know ends on ends, you're never gonna know something 100% is gonna work because for sorry most if you play any fighting game that has a lot of dynamic involved, where there's always something that can be counterplayed, then basically there is no something will be 100%. Well, technically, this is why I like counter characters because typically, if a character has a counter, then that's like okay, they're gonna do a strike. I'm gonna do this counter, and that should beat the strike. Like that's like the only time something's kind of usually guaranteed. And even then, there are certain counter moves that their follow up or attack is not guaranteed. Like for example, in Melted Blood, one reason I don't really play F Shikiryogi is because she has counters, but it is possible for the opponents to trigger those counters safely. While let's say like in Nitro Plus Blaster Muramasa, if you activate her counter, it's guaranteed. That's a guaranteed thing. So it's always a game by case scenario. But basically, my answer is no because for starters, unless I actually know exactly what my opponent is doing, I still have to try to take risks. In fact, the whole point of defensive gameplay is not just really can I block. Sorry, defensive gameplay is not just all risk aversions. Defensive gameplay is also in the realm of can I shut down what my opponent does, or can I make my opponent options invalid? And one thing to, and one like let's go ahead and hypothetical scenario. My opponent is doing a pressure. If their pressure string is not true, but what by true, as in it's not a frame type, I will push a button to check my opponent. I need to know, hey, is your pressure actually solid and good? If I don't think it's solid and good, or let me not say solid, if it's not a true frame trap, I am going to check you. That's the whole concept of checking. Is to basically, hey, did you make sure you cover your pressure against this option? So I'm going to say no. I don't. Oh, I won't. Sorry. Let me say. Will you? Sorry. That question. While playing for a game, do you ever push a button or perform an action where you know if 100% is going to work? I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly. Unfortunately, your boy's read comprehension skills. Basically, no, I don't need something to be 100% for me to do it. I will take the risk of, well, let me see if I can challenge what my opponent going to do because the goal is to make sure, hey, is what they're doing is true, is a true block string or whatnot. Basically, yes, I am going to take the risk. I won't not do something just because I'm not sure if it's going to work. I need to actually test it out. Or no, yeah, I need to see how does my opponent react to the idea of me actually pushing a button. Because for start, if I actually want to push a button, let's say frame trap. All right, do you think I'm going to try to push a button the next time, or are you going to try to do miss up? You gotta check your opponent. In the concept of checking opponents, basically are you doing something like is what you're doing? Is it a real pressure or is it a missive attempt? Or am I just over respecting you? Because that Yeah, I can tell you now. I'm always not blocking 100%. So I guess you will not do something if you're successful. It's not guaranteed. No, I'm still gonna try something even if it's not always successful. I'm willing to take the risk because the also thing about defensive gameplay is micromanaging bad option. Like if I'm in a scenario that I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I feel I could take that risk because it's either not going to lead to me being KO, then yeah, I'll take that risk. I'll take the risk. Like okay, let me try something. Let me try this option and whatnot. So yeah, I don't need 100% statistics or 100% scenario in order for me to try something, unless I'm playing something like a very turn heavy game or whatnot. So question two. While playing a fighting game, will you refuse to push a button or perform an action where you know for 100% fact that it will not work? When you're fairly certain, do you not engage? While playing a fighting game, will you refuse to push a button or perform an action where you know for a fact 100% that it will not work? This sounds like I said absolute. So basically, if I'm in a scenario where I know 100% something won't work, when you're fairly certain, do you not engage? Then I'll say I'm kind of inclined to say yes if I'm reading this. Like if I know something 100% is not going to work. Well, no. Here's the thing. I unfortunately do have that. If the opponent does do a good job of frustrating me, then I will push a button or do stuff. If they manage to do a good job of frustrating me or giving condition, I do definitely try to do stuff because either I'm trying to take my turn back or I'm afraid of getting put in. I have a problem of two things when I'm playing. I get tunnel vision a lot. Either I get tunnel vision to just try to block, but then I lose to some missile they may try that I was looking for, or I may be blocking for so long, or maybe because I'm so afraid to keep blocking for so long that I'm going to try to fight my way out of pressure. So I can tell you now, as someone who does try to prioritize playing defensively, I definitely do have the flaw of basically having panic attacks and doing certain things. Until I get comfortable with the scenario, it's when I know, okay, I won't do something either when I am comfortable with the scenario or if I've been in that scenario long enough to recognize, okay, I know what this is. I know I don't have an option to do anything with this, so I won't do it. In other words, I definitely do it. Otherwise, then yes, I am going to try something. Unless, well, again, if it's 100%, then yeah, I'm going to say. So let's read the question one more time. While playing a fighting game, will you refuse to press a button or perform an action where you know for 100% that it will not work? There's a lot of new scenarios where, for starters, something won't work at this range, but if you do a micro dash, oh, it may work. I can tell you right now, no matter how much of a lab monster you are, you won't know something 100% for a fact. But I guess if we are going by the scenario where it says 100% it will not work, I don't know because there are times where something you can recreate scenario and get different scenarios, sorry, get different results, even if you think you replicate it perfectly. Personally, uh, I'm willing to risk trying something a few times, like for data collecting or no, no, all right. I guess here's the problem with my mentality. Unless something is a complete replica of a situation, I am still willing to try something over again just to over again because, like I said again, if this is like a micro distance, or better, if my opponent's execution is not that on point or that consistent, like they may be able to do that cross up, that miss up that time, but would they do it again that second time or the third time? Human error is a factor, and you do need to consider that. Like, is your opponent able to do that consistently? And I feel that there is rarely a case where someone could ever do something 100% always, always. So I guess I have to say, once again, no on this if I'm reading the question properly. Maybe I can have someone re educate me next time. So they ask I asked these questions to a few people, and usually what I get is no on question one and yes to question two. Success is uncertain and impossible to guarantee, but certain failures should be avoided at all costs. No, now there's a couple of reasons for this. Humans by nature are unpredictable. Even if you are the greatest player in the world and download someone entirely, condition them to make tons of mistakes and read them like a book. You cannot throw what you'll do every single time. Most of the time, sure, not every time. You can study and know what human will do for a fact. Well, let's get back to this post and dissect this for a second. Humans by nature are unpredictable. Even if you are the greatest player in the world and download someone entirely, condition them to make tons of mistakes and read them like a book. You cannot know what they'll do every single time. Most of the time, sure, not every time. Yeah, I think this is kind of what I was talking about before. Like I said before, again, in the hypothetical, let's say this person has this pretty good cross up, but that cross up does have, let's say, a gap if, let's say, the player is not too fast or too slow in a certain thing. So basically, unless I really respect my opponent's ability to do something consistently, I will take that risk now and then to be like, mm, I'm going to try to do something here because I'm not confident you could probably do this thing consistently. Like whenever I play Black Dragon X, initially he's very strong, but after a longer session, things start to wane, and you know what? I'll take advantage of that if I can, or just a few other people. Like I said again, yeah, I feel that once again, I am not in a position where I would. Sorry, I personally believe a person won't do something 100%, and not only that, a situation can't always be 100% replicated when in the game set with somebody else. In training mode, you could probably replicate it at least 80 to 90% of the time, but 100%, nah, that's kind of reaching. That's reaching because we gotta talk again how the game responds your inputs. Was the spacing actually immaculate? Because you got setups are pretty strong, but if you're like a frame off in a certain distance or timing, then it could not work. Or not work, but rather you won't get the very exact same result. Which is why I'm willing to like, you know what? I'm willing to test, check, or take a risky action because I don't think something is that guaranteed. Or well, yeah, if I need to collect data, then yeah, I will take the risk if I need to collect data. It's not going to help me in a tournament setting, but in a game, but in a first to set or whatever, I'll take that risk. Yeah. Let's go to the second part. You can study and know what a human will do for a fact, know every scenario and determine the results in the moment. But you can certainly learn when failure will happen. You can study and determine when you are making a mistake and will fail. So you can study and know what a human would do for a fact. You know every scenario and determine the results in the moment, but you can certainly learn when failure will happen. You can study and determine when you are making a mistake and will fail. Yeah, I guess my reading comprehension because I'm reading it, but I'm not exactly absorbing it. Yeah, I'm reading it, but I'm not really absorbing it, or I'm not fully understanding what that means. Uh, I'll definitely probably actually reach out to Xanadu and maybe get something of a clarification, or maybe the next part will clarify because this is Twitter, so unfortunately, message are cut off. I want to tell you my fighting game theory. In the heat of the moment, you are not always necessarily looking for a good position. Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I was definitely saying. Yeah, but rather you are looking to avoid bad ones. You're trying to avoid failure rather than try to find success. This is a important distinction to make. If you're trying to avoid failure, that means the negative outcomes are out are weighted higher in your decision making. If the negative decisions are weighted higher, the more negative situations, the more you have to think about. So if I am understanding this correctly, basically saying because you're trying to avoid making a mistake, you're basically pigeonholing yourself to basically not take risk, not take notice of when your opponent may be doing something that you could either counterplay or adjust yourself to handle because you're too concerned about not making error. And that's the thing I want to say about this is what I want to say again about me being a defensive player. Like being a defensive player means I don't want to play risk aversion, but rather I want to micromanage how much bad my poor decision is. Like for stars, you got some people where once they're at their last limp of their life, they're like, all right, this match is already lost. I don't even want to keep fighting anymore and just lose. And just, try to surrender by basically just, not fighting anymore. Personally to me, until I am KO, I'm still going to keep going and fighting. Even if I feel the fight, even if I feel that round is lost, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try something to see how my opponent responds to it and see what I can gain. And of course, if there's an opportunity to make that come run back, I will try for that and whatnot. And like I said, give my defense. I don't think defensive gameplay means you're risk averse, but rather you are willing to make more calculated risks to, like, all right, I'm going to try to jump in on my opponent, not because I think the jump in is going to sorry, not because I'm like 30%. I think this jump in gonna work, but I'm 60% think this jump in might not work. However, I can afford to take that. I feel in the mind like, okay, where's my health file? Where's my opponent meter at? Okay, they don't got a full meter, so they can't really capitalize on this jump in. So I'm going to try. So I'm going to gamble on the jump in and see if I can yeah, take that. That is what I feel a good defensive player would do. Not that like, oh, I won't jump in because my I think my opponent's always going to enter because my opponent may not always anti-air. My opponent may not always enter, or they may even try to be risky and do something more risky on their part and whatnot. But get back to the point, yeah, risk. Basically, I just don't think you need to be a good defensive player. You don't need to be full risk aversion, but just be willing to micromanage how much risk you're taking and what you're willing to take. If you're not willing to take any risk, then I sometimes even work how you even play fighting games at times. So let's go and get to the next session. If you have two anti-airs and one of them covers most ranges and beats jump ins and generally works like 90% of the time, and the other has a really specific hitbox and only works when the opponent jumps from the exact range and only beats some jump ins, which we'll use. I also use both, yeah. Sorry, if I may, because I am in the opinion that you do need to use both. Like if I may, go on a tangent. I'm in a person like if I can remember, I'm not sure if it was Filipino man or if it was sorry, there was a Japanese player who basically says if you find a move or a tool that does one thing for the situation, but find out what other things it can be used for and whatnot. For case in point, when I played Last Play 2, and one of the reasons why a lot of people say my Last Play 2 gameplay was good as Yuki because most Yukis were well, there weren't that many Yuki to begin with, so maybe it was not that good. But basically, Yuki has multiple. She has a combo grab that goes to a launcher, and I switch up which launcher I use. Like I could do her jumping hard slash, which gives me the highest damage, but I actually prefer to use her jumping kick sometimes because it hits the opponent faster while they're much higher, and because of that, there's even more technically Oki time for me to not Oki, but let's say I have opportunity to disorient my opponent because I hit them higher with the jumping kick. I don't get the damage, but I get other options from that. And that's the same thing with the scenario of the anti-air. Like this, like you got one option that's a really good anti-air that could cover 90% of things, while the other tool can only anti-air some options and only works in specific scenario. But that specific scenario is actually what's good because that's usually the match. That's usually what that's where the matchup knowledge usually becomes very strong and good. Like your opponent may be aware of the option that's good 90% of the time, but if they don't know that, oh well, this other tool can beat this other specific scenario and challenge that, then yeah, if they're not prepared for that, then that tool becomes very highly valuable for either that matchup or against that opponent. So at least if you're asking me, both, yes. If there's one that was not Pacific now, I would use that because one, if it because one of the things, all right, because I'm not good at doing rush down, my then my other goal is to disorient my opponent by doing things that's not part of the trend or expected. Because the whole point of to really beat your opponent is to not to be predictable and whatnot. So yeah, like that's actually one of the issues I have. A lot of people where a lot of people are like, okay, I just want to use this option because it's like the best option in almost all cases. I'm like, that may be true, but don't deny the other use of the other options. Like, how about this? And Blaze Strangers, I know I'm on a tangent. It's my video. I'm going on a tangent. And Blaze Strangers, now, and the Wikipedia for, let's say, the character quote, they're saying, hey, only use the hard. They said only use the hard version of his DP, the or sorry, the medium version of his, or medium or hard version of DP, because it does more damage. Sorry, it does more damage, and it does more damage, and yeah, it does more damage. They say never really use the EX1 or never use the. Well, sorry, they say you can use the EX1 as a reversal, but they say never really use it in a combo and whatnot. But I'm like, well, when I actually start a combo with this light DP, I'm like, actually, it has a good, it's a good starter because one, it is pretty fast. It hits a point high in the air, and the pro ratio on it is actually not terrible. And because it's a deep, well, because of the command, basically he gets a good meter gain from using his light DP, and yeah, it's just like actually this option is pretty good. You could use this in other things. They were saying, well, actually, no, how about this? I think they're saying only use the medium DP as a combo ender, but I'm like, actually, it's a pretty good combo starter because it does 1200, and Blade Stranger's proration system based off what if you use the highest attack first, then it has the least amount of scaling usually, or it's not least, but rather it usually does better scaling for your combo going further. So I'm like, yeah, why don't you use his hard DP or medium DP as a combo starter? Because it leads a good meter build if you offensive skill it and etc. But they're like, nah, don't do it because it should only be used in this scenario. And this is where I usually have a lot of problem with a lot of Wikipedias I read. I hate how a lot of people have Wikipedia that basically says you should use this option only for this thing and never anything else. And I'm like, I usually don't believe in that type of mentality or thought process. But I ranted on further. Let's go on and see what more this has to obvious. Obviously, to say that you'll only use the right tool for every situation all the time, but that's not often how reality works. Often, you're just saying to lighten your mental set. So you go for tools that works for most of the time until you're showing you need other. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is kind of goes back to one of the philosophy I've been saying a lot of time. People don't know problem solving skills in fighting game. What am I talking about? Basically, whenever you play fighting games, you're going to be presented with problems. Like when you do lose, it's like, okay, I got a problem with this scenario. What can I do to solve it? And a lot of times people don't know how to problem solve it because one, problem solving requires you to make hypotheses, test out the scenario. But not only that, have ingenuity. In other words, you got to think outside the box. Okay, what can I do with this option? What can I do with that? What tool does this? What tool does that? And a lot of times people only want to go with the option that's the most secure and safest. And I'm like, I'm not personally that mentality. Like, sorry, King of Fighters, Mian. Like, I know a lot of people don't like to use Mian because they're like, well, she has no defensive tools until you use Maximo. But even then, sorry, how about this? A lot of people don't want to use Mian in King of Fighters because she can't use Maximo in combos really well. But her Maximo stuff are really freaking good neutral tools and whatnot. And they're really good neutral tools and whatnot. And I mean, it just she has good neutral tool. She gets a dive that are invulnerable. She gets to have an armor move and whatnot. And then her ES supers they're not terrible. They're pretty good, but they're like, oh, well, Maximo should only be used for combo, and that's the problem. A lot of people are like, oh, value. Okay, I need to use Maximo just for combo. Well, it's like, well, Maximo is a cancel, so you can, do it for that too. Like you can use it to cancel your long-reaching pokes and whatnot. Like you don't need to feel pressure like, oh, I'm at Maximo, I have to do a combo. Well, I mean, yes, you can get higher combo potential, but you can also use it for other stuff. But yeah, I definitely hear that statement and kind of feel that. Let's go on to the next one. All this is to get to the broader point, which is to say that overly specific tools feel bad to use, and in general, I just see them as worse tools, and I think some modern games have traded death in some areas for overly specific tools, including the defensive mechanic. Yes, this is the case. This is what I feel with a lot of artists working. It's like, okay, I could use this tool in this one specific scenario, but I tend to hate that because for me to use the tools I want to use, I have to replicate the scenario that makes it good. Which that is what conditioning is, but in a lot of our system works game, it is not really quite it's not really quite good. Sorry, it's not usually very feasible to condition condition points like, I want you to do this one thing so I can use my defensive tool much stronger. Because normally offensive option has so many ways to deviate their offense that I can't condition them to recreate that scenario. I guess here's a good example. In Killer Instinct 3, I play Kim Woo. I'm not really that good at baiting out the opponent's combo breaker, but one thing that Kim Woo does have is she has a command grab that the opponent has to tech. So it's a command grab that could work in combos, and if the command grab lands during a combo, I could get basically a risk free hard ender, or I could just send the combo. So personally, whenever I do get a hit, I always try to, not always, but I make a habit of going into that command grab, but the opponent can't tech that command grab. Just let you know, they can't tech it. So I go into that command grab, so my opponent can try to. So I go into that command grab, and my opponent catches wind that I'm doing that command grab, and then starts teching it. Then I can start doing my whatchamacallit. Um, Counter breaker at that scenario, because I've conditioned my opponent to always go for light. Sorry, they'll always. I condition my opponent to always try to take that grab because I made a habit of doing that. But that was me on the offense. So let me think of another scenario. It's not really working. All right, how about this? In Nacho Plus Blaster, Muramasa. So once I get a life, well, I want to say a life lead. Yeah, once I get a life lead, I just basically just start running away from my opponent and just slightly zone them out and whatnot. And because they're desperate to try to hit me, that's when I can use my counter because they're trying to catch me. Because I've successively, maybe I'm not good at this scenario. We're going to go ahead and just go to the next part, and I'm going to rethink on that later. But this is to me what I mean when I say that the modern game defensive mechanics are bad. Obviously, they work sometimes. Yeah, and that's the thing. There you go. Fine. That kind of really hits them more. Like, I hate in a lot of fighting games, my defensive mechanic only works sometimes. I'm not allowed to use my defensive mechanic in other scenarios other than this. And I'm not a fan of that. Well, let's say a game like Kingdom Hearts. One of the reasons why Kingdom Hearts defensive options are so good is because they're good for many scenarios. And not only that, you got different ways to apply your defensive mechanic. Thus, your opponent needs to be very basically have ingenuity. Like, all right, they need to recognize which defensive option I'm using, and then they need to have a counterplay for that defensive option. But let's say, like, maybe I shouldn't use Dragon Ball, but let's say Guilty Gear Strive. Basically, if I don't have the resource to use a defensive option, then my opponent can just have free reign to pressure me because I don't have resource for that defensive option. Or better yet, the risk and reward for me using those defensive options are, well, you can yellow Roman counsel me, but you just almost basically reset to neutral with you only having slightly better frame advantage. And it's like, the cost of reward is just not really freaking there. So, yeah, I'm definitely feeling what he is. And that's basically why, at least personally for me, our sorts of work fighting games have this problem. Other fighting games, I don't think have that much bad of a problem when it comes to defensive mechanics. Let's go on to the next part. If a tool has many bad uses than good uses, I don't want to use it because the risk is very high regardless of the reward. That's another topic to be discussed. The reward for these tools, but that besides the point I'm making. And this is actually what I said. A lot of people when they keep saying, "Oh, I mean, you got defensive options in Archer's Wars." I say yes, but they're not good defensive options. And they don't usually understand what I mean by good defensive. I say, in other words, I don't feel reward for using the defensive option. I just feel I mitigated a bad scenario for getting worse. I know I definitely said this before many times, but yeah, that's what I feel about these games. I don't really feel like I'm rewarded for using defensive option. How about this? The reason why I play Jira and Dragon Ball FighterZ is because I am rewarded when I made a good defensive choice, such as when I use my counter, when I've reflect a string and then use my steadying K-BAS or my other counter. Like, you're rewarded for making. So I'm rewarded for making the read that, okay, my opponent chose this option. I chose this option to counter it. I'm rewarded for that. While, and like, let's say Guilty Gear, if I'm blocking, then basically I'm gonna play back. In fact, if you talk a lot of Marvel players, they say if you're blocking, then you are losing. If you're blocking, you are losing the game. And I'm not a fan of so I'm losing because I chose to block instead of taking a hit, or I guess what they say is you need to just move out of the way. But then my problem with that is, well, if that's the case, then is everybody designed like that they can effectively move out of the way? No, not at all. So yeah, if you're a good player, you'll focus. Of course, you use tools effectively most of the time. Obviously, you cannot use them correctly 100% of the time because humans are inherently unpredictable. But you'll find the right spot to use them and make the most out of them. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I commented on that before, saying how I won't always expect my opponent to be 100% on the tool. However, does using a tool effectively make it a good tool? If you hammer in a nail with the orange, does that make the orange a good tool to hammer nails with? Or do you just make most of a bad situation? Not to say this is exactly how it is, but you get the point. I mean, yeah, I need to start liking this, but I'll do that on my own time. A tool should not be judged in its effectiveness by the time it works. It should be judged in all aspects. When it does work, how often does it work? What does it work against? Is the cost fair for the reward? Just because it can be used, does that mean it's strong? Fucking absolutely, my dude's on the dude is spitting. He is spitting, and I agree. This is exactly what I'm saying. This is why I tell people, like, I know one of the situations that happen in life. When I tell people I don't like playing Guilty Gear or Art Law or Party game because they got, I say bad defense option, they're like, but it's better than Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 4 or 5 defense option. And I'm like, that's not like, you just went from one poor extreme to just a slightly less poor extreme. Yes, we could say Guilty Gear has defensive option in comparison to Street Fighter 5, but that's because Street Fighter 5 barely had defensive option until as of recently. Realistically, even then, you can still even say that the offensive gameplay is still favor and whatnot, or rather, I only get defensive tools if I play a defensive character. And if I'm locked to a character, that tends to be a problem. I mean, I like playing defensive driven characters, but if I'm locked in to just play that character because defensive, then I have my issue. For Stars, Melted Blood, like I feel I'm not restricted to who I want to play in Melted Blood because thankfully Melted Blood defensive mechanics are so good and widespread for everybody with the dodge, backdash, bunker, shield, and then ES block. And then we get to character specific stuff when it comes to characters command and whatnot. Now I definitely lean towards character. Well, sorry, I play freaking C Wild Arc and C Ryogi. And these are not defensive candidates by any stretch, but I feel like I play them comfortably because Melted Blood gives me good defensive options that I don't feel helpless on defense. There are definitely stronger defensive characters I could be using, but then again, that's another time and matter. But regardless, yeah. While let's say again in like Guilty Gear, or like I say again, does Guilty Gear have more defense options? Yes. Do I have the ability to push block my opponent with the faultless defense? Do I have the instant block, which either, well, I guess in Strive case, just gives me meter and doesn't push my opponent away? But if you can only compare your defense option from Street Fighter to, or so from game A to game B, and you don't consider game C, D, E, F, and G and how other games handle it, then you got a skewed perspective. This is, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I choose to play a lot of different fighting games, so I can know how different fighting games work. Now, I won't lie right now, I had an issue where I thought, oh, Chaos Code has poor defensive options and whatnot. I thought, and I was ignorant for that. I was really ignorant to say that because coming from other games now and playing for other games, I came over like, oh, yo, the defensive option in Chaos Code is really strong and good. Because the reason why I thought they weren't that good, because like, all right, I got this defensive option, it gets my opponent off of me, but I had to use meter because besides roll and backdash, every other defensive option takes meter. But compared to, all right, here's the reason why I came around to Chaos Code. Let's say in a game like Dragon Ball FighterZ, if I use a character ES, which is a good defensive option, I'm now suffering one damage scaling. So I'm suffering damage scaling because the game has the, if an option is a full invincibility option that your opponent's only going to take blue damage, which they can recover if they, tag out that character, or sparking blast. Not only that, usually the damage scaling on them is very, very harsh. Like in a lot of games, they make the damage scaling hurt hard if you use a defensive option. If you try to, combo afterwards. Not only that, you also have a meter build penalty. Chaos Code has none of that shit. If I use a ES reversal that allows me to combo, that damage scaling is not. There's pretty much no damage scaling. Damage scaling still stays the same in that game. There's no meter build penalty, so I could use it. I could use a reversal move that was an ES, and if I could combo off it successfully, I could rebuild that. I could redo a combo that rebuilds my meter to almost where basically I didn't even use my meter to begin with, or I became meter positive. And then not only that, because of all the other defensive options I could use, like so I can do let's not say even ESDP. Well, for Sora, there are also good defensive options that are not meters around characters. So there are characters who do have frame one invincibility and whatnot. And if I have a full meter, I can do that reversal invincible option, and then I can chaos cancel and make sense. But yeah, how about this? Your level 3. Now I always thought that the level 3 activation, I think they call it Excel at Seed, basically where your meter just goes down as a timer and you can do so. But sorry, that Excel at Seed, that's like a frame 1 in full invulnerable move that your opponent cannot punish. It pushes your opponent off of you. You start recovering health, and you get air options back if you did it in the air. That is extremely strong and powerful tool, but I only came to realize and understand that when I played other games where that option wasn't available, and now I'm like, oh, yo, this actually is strong and good. In other words, I had to become a better player to realize, yeah, Chaos Code has good defensive options. So let's go to the next part. So a tool should not be judged and effective by the time it works. It should be judged by an option. All right, we read this part. Let's get to this part. It's hard for me to play older games where defensive mechanics are generally good or even really good and work most of the time and give you good reward or at least save, and then play newer games and say these are also strong defensive mechanics. I gotta like this right now because I mean this is Xanadu. You're hitting it. All right. Let's go ahead and read to the last part. But yeah, basically, I mean that's how I also even know that again these newer game defensive mechanics are weak because I go from older games. Like right now, a lot of people are saying, hey, why are you backdashing in the corner? That's not a good thing. But in older games, using your backdash while you're a corner was strong. It is strong in Real by Fatal Fury. It is strong in Garo. It is strong in, I think even Guilty Gear. I won't go for say strong Melty Blood, but it has a presence. Actually, Melty Blood might not be best one. But then again, I got Shield. I got Bunker. I got Heat. So, but yeah, from playing older games to newer games, and this is why I've been having my issues with a lot of the newer games, or at least the one that's praise I haven't. In fact, I think people really underestimate how good Omer Sorrow's defensive mechanics are. Like I know a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't use bow, counter, and retreat because it builds your fate, which basically puts you closer to doom. And while that is true, you do need that fate meter in order to do bow counters or to do your guard council options. And so far in Omen of Sorrow, besides let's say I think Arcturus, almost every other character has the ability to combo off their alpha counter, which is a pretty strong thing. And also, even if you get put in doomed, you have almost infinite you can do almost infinite retreat and bow counter follow-ups. So yeah, I mean you're at a disadvantage, but you have ways to fight out of it. But because people are so afraid to even get put in doom sizes as Omen and Sorrow, they're like, oh, you should never do it. Like they just basically like, never explore it, never do it. And I'm like, okay, fine. But then I question people, why do you play fighting games if you're so risk averse? Again, I'm a defensive player and I do take risk. I won't say my risks are always calculated and not always in my favor, but that's because as Xanadu said, human beings are not going to always be 100%, and those scenarios can probably even be either, how should I say it? if me micro moving or doing something slightly different can make that setup not be as effective, I will do it and whatnot. In fact, one of the things you like, all right, here's a a game that really does a good job of this. I think in Kabuki Clash. Like in Kabuki Clash, if you block certain moves, you take a lot of chip damage. So the counterplay for that is okay. Well, I it's actually better for me to just take the hit so I don't take as much damage. Did I basically lose the interaction? Yes, but I minimized just how much damage I'm taking. And this is what I feel is again good defensive play. Risk management. As in you manage not rather, but rather you manage mistakes. Like basically, sorry, when I go into a game, I am pretty much going to say I know I'm going to make a few mistakes. The goal is to not make all those mistakes compile into me snowballing into a bad thing. A good defensive player will be like, all right, I'm put in a bad situation. Things are probably going to get slightly worse, but I'm at least going to mitigate how bad it is by either doing this option or doing that option or taking this risk or taking that risk. Because trying to minimize all risk is impossible and usually not fruitful. But I think that's going to actually wrap up this. I'll say, hey, go follow Hip Boss John's Underdo because they have a lot of good things to say. They sometimes do tech video, and also if you want to see some twinks, he got a good selection on that too. All right, that will be it, and I'll see you later.